Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam.
I am delighted this evening to welcome our speaker, Dr. Emine Filiz Kolmek. Today's lecture is on the topic of revisiting the House of a World Empire in light of Islamic aesthetics. The Topkapı Palace in the 15th and 16th century. Let me just take a few minutes to formally introduce you and give you a short, brief background about Dr. Kolmek. Dr. Kolmek serves as an urban designer and landscape architect at Ankara Metropolitan Municipality. She also teaches part-time at Yildirim Beyazıt University in the Department of Architecture, and at the same time leading the landscape component of the transformation projects, of the urban transformation projects in the city of Ankara. She previously spearheaded Turkey's largest new Mamak urban transportation project. Before her role at the Metropolitan Municipality, Dr. Kolmek worked as an urban designer at Baskent Natural Gas Distribution Company, focusing on expanding the natural gas network in line with Ankara's city development plan. She holds a BA in urban design and landscape architecture from Bilkent University in Ankara, and an MA in interior architecture. Her thesis, the title of which, Social Determinants of Environmental Concern, subtitled, The Case of Chukwumar Bar, I'm sure I got that wrong, reflects her dedication to the intersection of social factors and environmental consciousness. Dr. Kolmek also earned her PhD in the architecture department of the Middle East Technical University in Ankara with a dissertation on Ottoman Islamic architecture, aesthetics, and visual culture in palatial architecture and landscape. The thesis focused on the case of Topkapı Palace in the 15th and 16th century. Her interests span Islamic aesthetics, art, visual culture, palatial architecture, Ottoman art and architecture, urban transformation, recreation projects, urban identity, social sustainability, and architectural identity. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Kolmek to engage with us tonight. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank you, HBK, for this kind invitation and having me for this lecture. Today I am going to make you a presentation entitled Revisiting the House of a World Empire in the Light of Islamic Aesthetics, Topkapı Palace in the 15th and 16th centuries. Topkapı Palace has always been one of the most important palatial complexes of Islamic geography, as it was considered as a medium for displaying the grandeur of Islam to the non-Muslim world for centuries. It was started to be built in 1459 by the command of Mehmed II, the conqueror of Istanbul, to create an imperial image claiming to be a world empire. The construction process continued as additions. After being used actively as the house of the state and the sultan until 1853, it continued its existence as a family home and later as a museum. In this lecture, we will focus on the 15th and 16th centuries of the palace, which housed the Ottoman ruling elite during the pinnacle of its hegemony. And instead of presenting only a descriptive and analytical knowledge about the palace, we will try to decipher and scrutinize the palace in terms of through an aesthetical analysis as the methodology of the study. In this presentation, We will try to scrutinize the Islamic roots behind the spatial and organizational preferences of the palace. As a dominant factor that influenced the Ottoman mindset was the Sunni Islamic belief system, the analysis of the palace will be based on the theoretical framework of Islamic aesthetics. So in the presentation, at first we will focus on what aesthetical analysis is as a methodological tool. Then we will highlight the concept of palace and the Ottoman palaces to make a terminological and conceptual clarification. As I will establish my analysis on the theoretical framework of Islamic aesthetics and try to decipher the Islamic roots behind the spatial preferences of the palace, we will briefly mention the Islamic codes in Ottoman culture and mindset to see how important the Islamic belief was for Ottomans. Then we will briefly touch upon formation of Islamic aesthetics and how it is reflected in the visual language of Ottoman Islamic art and architecture. After providing a stable ground, we will focus on the palace itself and make aesthetical analysis of the palace through some selected concepts of Islamic aesthetics. We will also analyze the Topkapı Palace in terms of household aesthetics of Islam, and it will lead us to make some concluding remarks. As I preferred aesthetical analysis as a methodology of my research, let me clarify what it is. Aesthetical analysis focuses on choices of form and order, indicating values and philosophies behind them, so it differs from descriptive analytical analysis in terms of its focus on not only the visibly clear and distinct form, but also its scrutiny of complete thought of things beyond the clear ones. And let me crystallize it with a painting that you see in the visual. It is Cabot's painting on the Europe Bridge. When we look at the painting, we see that the objects are very easily recognizable. There is a bridge and there are the figures of three men in the visual. The bridge has a very strict geometrical form. Gray and black tones are used as a color, and it is actually a dark image. Although the forms are quite visible, the content is much more than we see in the visual. Here, Cabot has created a scene that shows both the beauty and the lack of humanity in a monument of the industrial age, with the strict forms, dark colors, well-dressed but partially involved human beings. This is exactly what an aesthetical analysis is, we can say, because it does not focus on the appearances only, but also it considers the meanings behind the scenery. Another explanation comes from Zizma. He highlights that aesthetical analysis is like translation of one language to another, and the translation of the forms to the meanings and contents requires knowing both sides very well. Although some forms may seem so simple, they may carry lots of cultural codes and temporal meanings that have to be investigated to see the whole picture. Another clarification is from Shepard. He crystallizes that we may find a landscape peaceful because of the shades of green displaced in it, but the question of why we find green a restful color may have roots in psychology, cultural issues, religion, or some other values. So he says that in order to make an aesthetical analysis, at first we should study ourselves. Therefore, in today's presentation, in order to examine the Topkapı Palace deeply, I will not only exhibit the descriptive features and forms of its structure, but instead I will try to translate the formal and stylistic language of the palace into another which bears values, meanings, and philosophies. Since the architectural object, the Topkapı Palace, belongs to a specific culture, that is the Ottoman culture in this case, historical, cultural, and sociological layers should be scrutinized in a way that brings its beauty spell to reveal the origin of its aesthetic value. Today we will approach the Topkapı Palace from the viewpoint of aesthetic understanding of Islam, which is the first of its sort for an Ottoman palatial setting. After focusing on my methodology, we should clarify what the palace is as a concept. Palace is a general name given to large structures where the Sultan, king, or heads of the state stay, live, and work. In Ottoman dictionaries, it is seen that the words kasr and kashane are also used as the equivalent of word palace. The word kasr, which is of Arabic origin, is described as magnificent buildings or a house devoted to the use of monarchs. And in Ottoman sources, the concept of palace is described as Saray Hümayun, which means imperial palace. The word Hümayun in Ottoman dictionaries refers to belonging to the Sultan. In line with this meaning, the Sultan and the palace are at the head of Ottoman central government and the state. The palace, which is the residence and the office of the Sultan, is also the administrative center of the Ottoman Empire. In this respect, the palace is the showcase of the position to the whole world. Accordingly, we can say that the factor of religion has an undeniable effect. On management of such a state. In this respect, in the Ottoman Empire, palace represents issues relevant to religion and the ongoing secular life together. It is the administrative center. It is the science and higher education center. It is also the house of the Sultan. And in this endurance school, which is the higher education center, the future leaders may learn science, architecture, painting, archery, religious knowledge, and other sciences. There are some other Ottoman palaces as well. Bursa Palace, Edirne Palace, the Old Palace of Istanbul, Yıldız Palace, and the Dolmabahce Palaces are some other Ottoman palaces. As we will trace the roots of Islam in spatial preferences of the palace to reveal some embedded meanings behind the choices, we should also mention whether Islam was really an important issue for Ottomans or not. Actually, yes, it was very important for the Ottomans because Turks showed great respect for religion and made great efforts to dominate all areas of life and also ensure that it was carried in harmony with deep-rooted civilizations, traditions of the state. The unity of customs and religion in the administrative tradition seen in all Turkish states from the past and continued its existence in other Turkish Islamic states as well. The effect of religion on the cultural and social life of Turks who encounter Islam and later converted is a significant phenomenon. In the formation of the traditional Ottoman political institutions and the functioning of the state, Islam, the religion of the dominant mass, had a defining function. In the Ottoman Empire, the source of sovereignty was considered as divine, and the ruler at all levels used to legitimize their power by conforming themselves to the religious authorities. The Ottoman Empire has a very close relationship with the Sunni Hanefi version of Islam. The Ottomans took on religious color in the first rising stage as a principality. They also designed their administration within the scope of the religious field from the Sultan to the lowest level, and they tried to shape their institutions according to Islamic principles like the Muslim states before them. The Ottoman Empire, as the greatest defenders of the Islamic world, confidently preserved this role until the 17th century. After clarifications about methodology, palace as a concept, and Islamic codes in the Ottoman mindset, let me focus on the formation of Islamic aesthetics, as the analysis of the palace will be based on the theoretical framework of Islamic aesthetics. When we say Islamic aesthetics, we should understand the formulation of the things, which makes artistic objects judged beautiful, and what their artistic values depend on according to the general framework of Islamic doctrine. As art gains meaning in the cultural universe to which it belongs, the basic sources of Islamic art can be accepted as Quran, Hadith, Kalam, and Sufism. And in order to highlight aesthetic thought in prophetic teaching, we can say that Islamic art emerges from a worldview and finds its most concise expression in Tawhid. This teaching attributes the best and the most beautiful in every field as a responsibility of human beings, as Allah loves the good doers and evaluates the value of this with the intentions behind the actions taken. Man is always expected to behave in the best and most appropriate way to maintain harmony and congruity in the universe, and this is the way of respecting Allah and His way of creation. In this teaching, aesthetics and beauty, goodness, usefulness, and functionality are intertwined. To understand beauty is to understand existence. Islamic thought, which perceives the beauty as a part of morality, was born and developed as an activity of understanding, and understanding in that thought is an expression of consciousness of belonging. This relationship has created the perception of beauty in Islamic thought. In this thought, it is not possible to visualize and depict Allah as He is far beyond our imaginations, So Islamic artist reflects his works, feelings, and excitement towards him artistically with the stylization method arising from the unity of thought. And when we look at the relationship between spirituality and Islamic art, we can say that there is a close relationship between them, because Islamic art derives its form and meaning from its own belief system and spiritual values, and form and meaning are not independent from one another. The Islamic thought precedes a meaning, oneness, that is tawhid, and form is the name of the ground on which this meaning comes into being. Sayyid Hussein Nasr, who is an important researcher in these fields, exemplifies this with two different mosques, as you can see in the slide. One is the Delhi Mosque in India, and the other is Al-Qarawiyyin Mosque in Morocco. He says that despite the local differences and the materials used, the structural techniques, huge distances and the like, one feels in the same artistic universe as they share the same spiritual universe. The perceptions of time and space are also very important to understand the thought system. In Islamic thought, time is a composition formed by recreation of moments every time. As in the compilation of Quran and the order of the studies it includes, there is not a linear order in time. Instead, there is a circular, spiral movement and continuous creation at every moment. The idea that the new is more valuable than the old has no place in this conception of time. And when we study space in Islamic thought, there is a unifying approach, as the entire earth has been made a place of prayer. Beauty in space is associated with heaven. Harmony with nature is a show of respect of Allah's creation. The space is not passive in front of people, thus it cannot be perceived from one point. After drawing a general frame about Islamic aesthetics, I determined these basic principles, approaches of Islamic aesthetics. All the principles have direct or indirect reflection in the Islamic aesthetic sensitivity and understanding of art. One important issue that should be highlighted at this point is that when we can also encounter some of these concepts about Islamic aesthetics and art in other cultures, the existence of some principles adopted by Islamic thought in other cultures does not result in the fact that Islamic thought is directly influenced by the same mentality as the cultures of the past, or borrow exactly what they have already established. When some of these concepts are examined one by one, it can be misunderstood that Islamic thought has a similar worldview to the ancient Greek, Egyptian, or Byzantine cultures on the one hand, and the Far Asian cultures on the other hand. Interaction between cultures is inevitable and it is not a deficiency. Nevertheless, there is a feature that distinguishes Islamic art from other cultures, which also includes all principles. It is the principle of tawhid, oneness of Allah, and this changes the ground on which all artistic applications are built. As these concepts constitute the solid ground for the analysis of the palace, the selection process has utmost importance. While determining these concepts, I carried out a detailed study on the literature on Islamic aesthetics and determined the concepts mentioned in common in the sources written. And then I filtered these concepts and selected according to their consistency with the main approaches of Islamic doctrine. The table on the slide shows the process of selection for the mentioned concepts. The actual table is much bigger than this one, but I wanted to share a part of it as to provide a glimpse about this process actually. When we make research on the visual language of Ottoman Islamic art and architecture, the studies show that there are three main decorative programs. These are calligraphy, geometry, and floral ornamentation. Calligraphy is the most original and important contribution of Muslims to visual arts. Oleg Grabar says that the aim of the calligraphy was to evoke the key Muslim idea that all creations and all acts occur only by the will of God. Floral ornamentation is associated with heaven, which is the zenith of beauty in Islam. In this teaching, nature is perfect beauty created by Allah. Therefore, minimal manipulation and intervention are main attitudes toward nature. Floral ornamentations, which are parts of nature and heaven, thus used in Islamic designs commonly. Geometric designs lie at the heart of Islamic design for centuries, although there are many debates about whether it arises as an alternative to the prohibited depiction of living creatures. Actually, it is not. It should always be remembered that abstraction in Islam was not born because of the lack of skill on the artist's part nor out of religious prescription, but mainly from a rejection to materialism with all its transient qualities. As also Aluzar Peker says, geometry was the most appropriate way of presenting Allah's infinite existence and intellect and all of the created world. It is a curtain or a screen which only mind passes through for higher dimensions. Vertical axes, domes, circles, square, octagons have all different symbolic meanings. After establishing a strong theoretical base for the analysis of the palace, now we will dive into the magnificent Topkapı Palace itself. As Isma indicates, making an aesthetical analysis is like translation of one language to another. Therefore, I will briefly describe the palace, mention its functional and floor plan, and after this, we will analyze the Topkapı Palace through some selected basic concepts of Islamic aesthetics and household aesthetics of Islam. But at first, let's take a pause for a breeze from the palace. Let's focus on the floor plan of this palace. Ottoman Palace organization has four main sections in general: private living area harem, educational space enderun, administrative center Divan-ı Hümayun, and service and protection area is Birum. The three monuments in the palace, three gates, Bab-ı Hümayun, Bab-ı Selam, and Bab-ı Sade, shape the structure according to the organization with the squares in front of them. The first courtyard between the main entrance gate of the palace, Bab-ı Hümayun and Bab-ı Selam, is a waiting place in its original use. It is not only a place where Birum people work, but also a place where the public can enter and where soldiers demand. The second courtyard, entered by Bab-ı Selam, is a courtyard surrounded by formal functional structure. This courtyard is also the place where the ceremonies were organized. The third courtyard, entered by Bab-ı Sade, is the part that the public could not enter. And there is a school, that is the education center, and the supply room where the Sultan accepts council members take place in this part. The fourth courtyard is the harem. It consists of two sections, Harem-i Hümayun, where the Sultan lived, and the harem, where the palace women lived. The courtyard system of the Topkapı Palace shows a linear feature with slightly shifted exits from one another. The courtyards are designed in a hierarchy from general to special, from monumental to human dimensions. And these are the main gates that we mentioned. Maybe the ones who have seen the palace can remember these magnificent palaces, the gates here. All the concepts that Islam emphasizes directly or indirectly reflect the Islamic aesthetic sensitivity and understanding of art. The distinctive feature of Islamic art lies in its close relationship with this dimension. To better understand Islamic art, we need to determine and explain its principal and conceptual features. These principles serve as a key criterion for the value or success of the work of art and establish a paradigm for the extent to which a certain aesthetic understanding is Islamic. Although I have studies on the reflections of all these concepts on the Topkapı Palace, and due to the time limit, we will follow the traces of these some selected concepts from here. They are the red ones in the slide. Tawhid, beneficence and functionality, harmony and congruity, clarity and intelligibility, reverse perspective, and iconism. We will focus on these reflections of these principles on Islamic aesthetics. The first one is Tawheed. Tawheed, accepting through mind and heart that Allah is the one and only, and it is the essence of Islam. The principle of Tawheed is the unity of thought and action that actually makes Islamic art the art of Islam. All these concepts stem from the understanding of Tawheed, and their results are aiming at reaching at Tawheed again. So, therefore, it would be correct to claim that the way the whole of the basic principles of Islamic aesthetics was reflected in the palace, and they are in fact the reflections of the principle of Tawheed, we can say. The second concept that we will touch upon is beneficence and functionality. In many verses of the Quran, which is ontologically and semantically the main source of Islamic art and aesthetics, the perfect creation is associated with creating with a purpose. Two example verses are, "We have not created the heaven and earth and everything in between without purpose." He created the heavens and the earth for a purpose. He shaped you in the womb, perfecting your form, and to him is the final return. Hence, beneficence and functionality are the conditions of beauty and exist as a part of perfection for the work of art. Being functional and providing necessary benefit are the requirements of beautiful designs. And when we look at the analysis of the analysis of the reflection of this principle can be started even with the reason for the construction of the palace. After Mehmed II conquered Istanbul, he immediately had built a palace in the area where today's Istanbul University is located. As the empire, whose claim was to be a world empire, needed a new and more comprehensive palace structure which provides a necessary and sufficient environment for the state affairs and could accurately reflect the image of the state, Topkapı Palace decided to be built. So, the reason for the construction of the palace is to fulfill the necessary functions and provide the necessary benefit. We know that the construction of the palace was not completed in one go, but formed in the process of time with additions. During the reign of Süleyman I, the expansion of the state and the increase in the number of its servants necessitated the construction of functional new buildings, and additions were made to the palace so that it could fulfill the function of representing the increasing power of the state. While the palace was a stage where the power of dynasty was presented, the administrative center of the empire, the educational institutions, and the residence for the imperial family, it was also a building complex that housed thousands of residents grouped according to private and public services. Since it fulfills these functions successfully, it has preserved its existence and importance for about 400 years. While the principles of functionality and beneficence are important in the whole of the palace, it is possible to see the traces of this mindset in buildings and gardens on smaller scales. For example, Bab-ı Hümayun, you will see its restitutions at the top. The monumental gate of the palace opening to the city was not designed as a monumental gate that only allowed the palace to pass. Its name is a door, in fact it's a gate, and this gate is a building consisting of 2 domed courts on either side of the gate, a cellar, 3 guard rooms on a mezzanine floor with stairs on both sides, a bathing cubicle, and an upper floor that no longer exists today. Based on this background, the monumental door was strengthened and enriched with spatial benefit and function, apart from only a symbolic meaning and a singular function. The same situation was valid also for the middle gate. Besides, we can talk about the gardens of the palace. The gardens of the palace were not only used for visual feasts, but also occasionally added functionality. It is known that the palace gardens, some of which are private gardens, were built in a way that some of them were planted as flower gardens and some as vegetable gardens to be used in the palace kitchen. And we see this consideration and its reflection also in some small-scale elements like fountains in the palace. The fountain that Süleyman I had built in the entrance of the audience chamber is an example for this. The fountain and its epitaph, which he had built for himself and as life for the people of the divan, are as follows. Sultan of the world, Solomon of the age, fountainhead of generosity and the sea of beneficence, had this fountain built for charity, as the water of life for the people of the divan. Our third selected concept is harmony and congruity. Let me start with a verse again. He is the one who created 7 heavens, one above the other. You will never see any imperfection in the creation of the most compassionate. So look again. Do you see any flaws? This verse shows that there are no cracks, gaps, openness, voids, aesthetic defects, or ugliness in Allah's cosmic creation. It also refers to what should happen in human creation and artistic activity by analogy. Al-Ghazali also listed the 4 conditions necessary for something to be aesthetic as proportionality, harmony, congruity, and order. Congruity is the state of being balanced, moderate, and natural. Balance and order are 2 important concepts related to each other. There can be a balance disorder, and a balance appears to be disorderly. The perfect balance created by the union of 5 fingers of different sizes on one hand is an example for this. They are all different in size and shape, but still has a perfect balance which provides maximum beneficence and functionality. There are different points of view whether symmetry is necessary for achieving harmony in architecture. Al-Jurjani confirms that although there is no symmetrical relationship, a fine balance that looks like irregularity can also be harmonious in any design. He exemplifies this through a piece of jewelry. His perception of harmonious composition includes dissimilar elements which he calls the affinity of contraries. It cannot be said that Topkapı Palace has a symmetric concern since the first time it was built by Mehmed II. The Sultan shaped the palace according to his own taste, with the principle of diversity. Incompatible with Al-Jurjani's approach, the palace is not symmetrical. However, it is not devoid of harmony, congruity, and integrity. Just as the 5 fingers of one hand are different from each other but they are in harmony, the spaces of the palace and the general campus are in harmony as a whole with their harmonious structures and scale, the design language fed from the same source as the style, and the functional buildings that serve its purpose in complete congruity. Maybe we can talk about one exception. As the harem section hosted sultans with different personality traits, and therefore it was the section that most affected by personal taste and was less legible than other sections due to excessive additions. When evaluated as a whole, it had less harmony and congruity than the rest of the palace. Let me share how the principle of clarity was reflected in the palace and start with a verse again. These are the verses of the book, the clear Quran. Also, in many other verses, clarity and intelligibility are emphasized in Quran. This principle of clarity in the Islamic creed has influenced Islamic artists in many ways, from theme to form, and turned to an Islamic rule which covers all areas in life. And this principle prevented from stripping the will of its addressee and affecting him with a kind of illusion. So we can definitely say that this principle has a strong reflection on the Topkapı Palace in many ways. At first, it has a very crystal clear functional design scheme and, in parallel, a unique spatial separation. Besides, the message that the palace wants to convey with its existence is perhaps the most transparent and open point of the palace. Its location on a hill that unites 2 continents is a deliberate choice for the empire that has the ideal of dominating the world. Besides, the inscription of Babi Humayun, which is the first entrance gate of the palace, is striking with its clear messages. The reason for the existence of the palace, the beliefs behind it, the values, what kind of an ideal it hosts, what kind of power the Sultan is positioned in according to the mindset of the state can be regarded as the most explicit messages of the palace. Let me read the inscription on Babi Humayun. The Sultan of the 2 continents and the Emperor of the 2 seas, the shadow of Allah in his world and the next, the favored of Allah on the eastern and western horizons, the conqueror of Constantinople, Sultan Mehmed Han, son of Sultan Murat Han. May Allah make his empire eternal and exalt his residence among the most lucid stars of firmament. Yet all sections does not have the same clarity as a spatial design order, especially the harem section is again far from easy to read as it has been shaped eclectically according to the taste of different users over time. Nevertheless, it has a very clear hierarchical layout based on protocol and discipline principles, compatible with the life levels and duties of the classes it hosts. Reverse perspective is one of the most dramatic concepts of Islamic aesthetics. Islam is a belief system that believes in the invisible behind the visible and tries to reach in, and it does not reduce the gaze to the visible. For this reason, the central perspective, which is a prisoner of a single point, is not suitable for this doctrine. Central perspective is the product of a one-sided view and it is incomplete. It is subjective as it centers on where the subject stands. Although some accuse cultures adopting reverse perspective over central perspective by primitiveness and incompetence, according to Florensky, it is actually the opposite. Reverse perspective is a way of perceiving the world from the point of view of a non-truth, which centers on neither the subject nor the object. Reverse perspective on architecture supports the state of being in contemplation, which is expected from Muslims to keep their consciousness constant. This principle is also reflected in Islamic architecture. In this architecture, the works do not have a facade or front that can be perceived by a single glance. In order to perceive and experience the structures, it is necessary to walk around them. In the visuals, you can see how this principle was embodied in the palace structures. The first two figures are different facades of audience chamber, and the figure below is the Çinili Köşk with its different facades. And it is claimed that no discussion is complete without a discussion on figurative painting in Islamic arts. Actually, it is a broad subject, but let's at least mention it. Aniconism, which means opposition to the use of icons or visual images to depict living creatures or religious figures, is one of the most important themes. In order to analyze the reflections of the principle of aniconism, I prefer to choose a specific place, that is the prize room of Mehmet III. The reason for the selection is that this room, built by Sinan the architect, is the only place in the whole palace where the original interior order of the 16th century and Islamic tiles have not been disturbed. It is significant that it reflects Islamic art and aesthetics deeply, and instead of sculptures or depictions of creatures, the use of calligraphy, geometry, and floral ornamentation are Islamizing the space by avoiding depictions. So far, we have revealed the traces of Islamic root in the palace through selected fundamental approaches of Islamic aesthetics. In addition to this, in order to deepen the analysis on the Topkapı Palace, I believe that some special approaches specific to different types of structures deserves to be emphasized. I mean, although Topkapı Palace is a complex of buildings with different functions, from state offices to places of prayer, from madrasas to libraries, from mansions to reception halls, when evaluated collectively, it is ultimately a house, the house of the state and the house of the sultan. Therefore, it will be enlightening to analyze household aesthetics in the Quran and the Sunnah, which means the conditions for a house to be beautiful in Islam, and follow their traces in the palace, to better understand the reasons behind spatial and organizational preferences. Themes about household aesthetics are mentioned both in Quran and Hadith. In Quran, it is concentrated on the concept of privacy, whereas in Hadith and Sunnah, it is more broadly explained. Width, height, mobility, furnishing and decoration, spirituality, and household in macro plan are the main themes that were mentioned in the Hadiths. In this presentation, due to our time limit, we will mention privacy, furnishing and decoration, and spirituality in the Topkapı Palace. Let's begin with privacy. Revelation, which is the source of Islam, is also the source of Islamic aesthetics. In the Quran, it is seen that there are some rules about the Islamic dwelling, and the verses on this subject mostly focus on the concept of privacy. Parallel to this, almost all of the works written on life in the Topkapı Palace have given extensive attention to the strict privacy of the palace. First of all, the harem section, where the sultan and his family live, take its name from this concept. In the Topkapı Palace, harem represents the sacred and close part of human life. Apart from this, the choice of location is closely related with the Ottoman's considerations on privacy. Panzer, a foreign ambassador of the period, explains that the first thing that was done to ensure complete secrecy was to build a solid inner wall around the summit of the hill on which the palace would sit, and build high and solid walls starting from the hill in the Golden Horn and reaching to the Sea of Marmara to completely separate the palace area from other parts of the city, which was being kept with 26 iron winch doors. In addition, it is known that privacy in each courtyard was being kept, as there was very strict regulations on the passerby of the gates and user of the courtyards. And also in the harem section, we know that there were special passages which provide sacred passings for the sultans and his favorites. The importance of privacy in the palace is also reflected in the inscriptions. On the Harem-i Hümayuniye, as you see in the visual, the first part of the 53rd verse of Surah Al-Ahzab is written, that is, O you who have believed, do not enter the houses of the Prophet except when you are permitted. By reminding the verse that is forbidden for people other than those who are allowed to enter the house of the Prophet, it is emphasized that it is forbidden to enter the house of the Sultan or even a Muslim without a permission. Another issue that needs to be emphasized in household aesthetics in Islam is furnishing and decoration. The restrictions and recommendations on this issue focus on two main subjects, simplicity and the house being free of non-Islamic religious elements. What is meant by simplicity is to avoid ostentatiousness and extravagance in the furnishing and decoration of the house, and avoid elements that distract attention while worshipping. These suggestions and recommendations are in perfect harmony with the principle of humility. If we evaluate Topkapı Palace in these matters, we can say that first of all, the palace is free of elements that symbolize different religions, such as the cross, unique to and identified with non-Islamic religion. It is clear that sculptures and depictions belonging to non-Islamic cultures are not used in the decorative programs of the palace. Instead of them, the main decorative programs of Islamic arts, fed by Islamic doctrine, floral design, geometry, and calligraphy were used. As for the simplicity of the palace, actually this analysis and evaluation is somehow relative, because we can make this analysis in three different ways. I mean, if we make this analysis by comparing the palaces of different states which are less powerful than the Ottoman Empire in the same period, we can get a different result. Or if we analyze this in terms of by comparing the might of the empire and the Topkapı Palace itself, we can get another result. If we evaluate the palace's own structure without a comparison, we can get another result. So I can say that personally, I think it would not be correct to claim that the palace is in complete harmony with the household aesthetics of Islam, because although Topkapı Palace is simpler compared to the existing world palaces used in the same period, it is known that it can be built more magnificently against the might of the empire. But when it is evaluated structurally alone, it cannot be said that it has a simple and unpretentious furnishing, or the decoration of the palace is free from glamorous elements that avoid the use of different and eye-catching colors. The magnificent elements in the palace have always been depicted in the literature and explanations of the foreign ambassadors. And lastly, we will focus on spirituality in the household. Another essential point that our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ recommended for a house to be beautiful is that it should not be used only to sleep, eat, rest, and to provide safety. The Muslims should also maintain a spiritual environment in the house. He illuminated this advice with the hadiths: do not turn your houses into graves, surely the devil runs away from the house in which the Quran is recited. And in another hadith, if a person recites the Quran in his house, the house expands against his people, and the angels are ready there. The devils run away, and the good increases. And when the Quran is not recited in a house, it narrows its owner, and the angels leave it, and the devils invade it, and the good decreases. So, if we try to evaluate Topkapı Palace from this point of view, it is known that the Quran is constantly the advice of our Prophet ﷺ, the Quran recitation has never stopped, even for a minute, for ages in the palace in the chamber of sacred relics. It has been non-stop for ages. And in addition to the non-stop recitation, with its 10 mosques, 3 prayer places, and 13 libraries, the palace definitely has a spiritual atmosphere. To sum up, architecture is a reflection of cultures, values, and objectives of a society. And carrying out studies on palace architecture, especially in Islamic lands, is valuable because the studies on Islamic architecture generally condense around religious monuments. In this lecture, we focused on the Topkapı Palace, which hosted a powerful empire with a deep-rooted civilization for centuries, continued its existence as a family home, and later as a museum. As a Muslim ruler whose empire's land expanded 3 continents, the Sultan was the leader of all Muslims, and the Topkapı Palace was considered as a medium for displaying the grandeur of Islam to the whole world. Considering the extraordinary importance of the palace involved Ottoman and Islamic architectural history, we can say that studies with a pluralistic perspective are quite limited, and historical literature mostly introduces the palace in a functional framework with few exceptions. However, it is vital to develop new perspectives to understand and make sense of a palace with varied contents like the Topkapı Palace. Spatial preferences are multi-layered, and so the analysis of them should be. Since Islam is a worldview, a way of thought, which influences all practices in our lives, tracing its reflections and roots in all studies is necessary and deepens our understanding. In this lecture, we analyzed the Topkapı Palace based on the theoretical framework of Islamic aesthetics. We scrutinized the palace through some selected basic approaches that were tawhid, beneficence and functionality, harmony and congruity, clarity and intelligibility, reverse perspective and aniconism of Islamic thought. We have also touched upon how the household aesthetics of Islam was embodied in the palace by focusing on privacy, furniture and decoration, and spirituality in the palace. Actually, due to the time limit, we could only mention a few of them, and with this theoretical framework on Islamic aesthetics, we can analyze some other architectural pieces in Islamic geography, and we can make some comparative studies between them. We can also trace Islamic aesthetics in figurative arts, calligraphy, poetry, literature, and music. By enhancing and deepening our understanding of Islamic aesthetics, art and architecture, and interpreting them in the light of theoretical, historical, and critical issues, I believe that we can contribute to increase the visibility of enhanced Islamic cultural heritage. I have elaborated this topic in a broader sense in my dissertation, so here I put some of the selected references. Thank you so much.